Hi, Phyllis here from southernfrugal.com. Tonight I'm going to make a German chocolate sheet cake. And this is really my own recipe because I didn't like the other recipe. It kind of always fell, and was gummy on the bottom. So I had to do a lot of altering, so we'll just call this my recipe now. I'm going to show you the ingredients. First of all, we will need 2 sticks of softened butter. And softened by, you can just sort of mash it around, see? That's softened. You don't want it melted. 2 cups of sugar, 1/3 cup water with 14 squares of the Baker's sweet chocolate bar, German sweet chocolate bars. There'll be 18 little squares in this, and you need 14 of them in 1/3 a cup of water, and just put it in the microwave and dissolve it in the water. And then let this cool to really room temperature. And you can do that, or the way I do it is after it's in the microwave and I've stirred it around and got it all dissolved and melted, then I just sit it down in a little bowl of cold water and get it back to room temperature. You'll need 4 extra large eggs. Make sure you use extra large because this recipe depends on that. Separated. So this is 4 extra large egg yolks and 4 egg whites. You'll need baking soda, 1 teaspoon, salt, about 1/4 of a teaspoon, and of course pure vanilla extract. You'll need 1 teaspoon of that. Make sure you get the pure vanilla extract. It tastes much better in cakes. And of course I always use white lily when I'm making cakes. So this is white lily all-purpose flour, and you'll need 2 cups and plus 1/2 cup. So 2.5 cups of the flour. And then you'll need 1 cup of cultured whole buttermilk. Don't use the one, no fat or fat-free and all that. Make sure it's whole cultured buttermilk. Now, if you can't find this, you can make your own by using about 1/2 cup of sour cream and about 1/2 cup of milk. That'll really do the same thing. Okay, I think that's it. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and cream my sugar and the 2 sticks of butter, which equals 1 cup, and my egg yolks, and I'm also going to put the vanilla in, and then I'm going to pour this chocolate mixture in and mix all that together real thoroughly. But before I do any mixing with my little small mixer, I'm going to do the egg whites, and I'm going to beat them to the soft peak stage. And then I say I don't have to worry about my beaters. Then I can put my beaters right into the butter. But if you do it the other way around, you won't ever be able to get these up into peaks because they can't form peaks when you beat them. If there's any kind of grease, on the beaters or in the bowl, or even any egg yolk in there, it'll cause them to not beat up properly. So I'm going to do all that, and then I'll be right back. Alright, I have thoroughly mixed my butter and my 4 egg yolks. So that'd be 2 sticks of butter, 4 egg yolks, and 2 cups of sugar and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then I also incorporated 1/3 cup water where I had melted the 14 pieces of German sweet chocolate, little squares, and then let that cool to room temperature. Now you see this kind of looks like icing now. Now the next step is to alternate between adding the flour. That'd be 2.5 cups of sifted all-purpose flour and 1 cup of whole milk buttermilk. Now the way I'm going to do this is first I'm going to pour in flour and just mix that up by hand. Sort of try to get it incorporated as much as you can. Alright, now next, and notice I'm not using the beater at this point. I'm not using my electric mixer. Now I'm going to pour about a third of the cup of the buttermilk, a little more than that, about a third of the cup. And I'm going to mix it up again, still mixing it by hand with my spatula. Just get it incorporated in there. Okay, now I'm ready for a little bit more flour. Mix that in. Sorry, I had to rinse my hands off. Okay, now we're going to go back with one more third of the buttermilk. Mix that in again, just using your spatula. The only time you really mix cake batter a lot is when you're mixing the sugar, the butter, and the eggs, or in this case, egg yolks. Because if you mix it with the beater a lot after you've added the flour, you're going to end up with a tough textured cake. So you want to not do it that way. Okay, now I'm going to come back with a little more flour, and I'm going to make sure that I end with flour. So mix that in real good. Okay, now I'm ready for the last of my buttermilk. Just dump that all in. Again, just mix it up with a spatula. Don't worry about any lumps, because what you'll need to have done with the flour is sift the flour before you measure it. And then once you've measured it, just dump it back into the sifter and then add your baking soda and your salt and just simply sift it again. That will eliminate probably 90% of lumps in a cake if you will sift it. Now, some people sift their flour even more than I do. So, all right, now I'm going to add the rest of the flour. So I began with flour and I'm going to end with flour. Okay, now that I've got the flour incorporated pretty well, I'm going to use the electric mixer just a little bit and get rid of any final little lumps in there. There are just a few, but not many. Okay. Going to need the mixer anymore, so I'm going to just set that aside. Now the next and final step, see how creamy that looks, is to add the 4 beaten egg whites. And remember, I used the beater on these first thing because I didn't want my beater blades to get grease on them, so that it would form stiff peaks. See? So with this, you're going to dump it all in at one time, right on top. And now, get all that in there. Now that you've got the egg whites in, what you want to do is fold the egg whites in, and you do that by going up from the bottom, up and over. You don't want to stir it around and around, also, because you're actually incorporating air into your cake batter. So I'm just going to tilt my bowl up a little bit and just go around and around. And see, the volume, of course, of the cake batter is going to greatly increase with this latest addition. And you want to incorporate it until you get rid of all those large blobs of beaten egg whites. Once you don't see any more of those, then it's going to be ready to dump in the pan. Now, the pan I use is, I think I measured it at a 10 by 15. But any sheet cake pan, of course, would work, or you could divide this in between smaller pans if you wanted to. Okay, I think that's pretty well incorporated. Now, the lumps, or what look like lumps, that you might see in this are actually where the egg whites were incorporated. And that's exactly what it's supposed to look like. So now I'm going to dump this into a greased and floured sheet cake pan. And I'm going to bake this at 325 degrees for about 45 minutes, or until a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean. Now you want to make real sure you don't overbake it, because this will make a very, very moist cake. And the icing that we're going to use on it is going to make it even more moist. So I'm going to go ahead and spread this out in my pan. Alright, there it is. And I'll be back when it gets done and we will make the icing. Okay, here's the recipe, and I hope that you can read this. And you can probably put your computer on pause to be able to read it. And here are the instructions. Sorry, it's a little sloppy. And here's the recipe for the icing. Now, I'm going to show you how to fix the icing as soon as the cake gets done. And we're going to pour that right on top of the cake. And we're going to actually have some of this cake while it's actually still warm. Let me go back up to the top again. It's German chocolate sheet cake. And if you don't have a 10 by 15 pan, you know, you could divide it between two pans or whatever. So when you want to make sure your butter is softened at room temperature. You don't want to melt that butter, okay? There it is. Now that's, let's see, I kind of messed up there. That's 1/3 cup water. You can't hardly read that. There are the instructions. And again, here's the icing recipe. Alright, we'll be back and make the icing. My cake is now done and we are going to make the icing. I have melted 4 tablespoons of butter. And I've got my burner turned off now. So I'm going to drop in the 4 squares of the Baker's German chocolate. And I'm just going to stir this around until it's thoroughly melted. It shouldn't take long. And by the way, my cake cooked about 43 minutes. So depending on what kind of pan you use, if you used like a light aluminum pan, it might not need to cook as long, or it might need to cook longer. But you just need to check it with a toothpick. You don't want to overcook this cake, okay? All right, now see how it's melting? Make sure that it's all melted and no lumps are still in there on that chocolate. Alright, now I'm going to show you my secret ingredient in this icing. I'm going to use about a tablespoon of light corn syrup, which really doesn't have any taste. And what that's going to do is prevent the icing from becoming sugary, which can sometimes happen if you add icing to a warm cake. So this is a secret ingredient. You don't have to use it, but you take a chance on your icing turning sugary if your cake is still warm, which of course mine is. So, all right, just going to mix that in. Now, this of course is warm, pretty well warm. I'm just going to go ahead and put in a teaspoon of vanilla. And you might not want to do this, but I like to just use a dash of salt. Mix that up. And now I'm going to put in the buttermilk. Now, again, it's whole cultured buttermilk, and I'm going to use about 1/3 of a cup. And believe me, I've been doing this so long, I know almost the exact way to do it without even measuring it, but you might want to measure it. Now, the whole idea here is to make a slightly runny icing. So I didn't put down the amount for the confectionery sugar. What I generally do is just kind of hold the bag, you know, not dumping all of it in, and dump what's probably about maybe 2.5 cups of the confectionery sugar. And then just mix that in and look at it. You want to be able to pour the icing onto the cake, because this icing is also going to help the cake be very, very moist. All right, now see, that's just about right. And again, I don't have the burner on. I only use the burner to melt the butter and then melt the chocolate into the butter. I get to lick that finger. Okay. Now I'm going to use my little wire whisk and try to get the lumps out as I can. But when I pour it on the cake, if it's still got some lumps in it, it will be perfectly okay, because this cake is not going to be a real pretty cake, but it is going to be a moist and delicious cake. Now, if you need more, if this looks too watery to you and you want to add a little more confectionery sugar, that's fine. Or if it's too thick, you could just add a little more buttermilk. Okay. Now that looks just about right to me. Still got a few little lumps in it, but that's okay. See? It's runny. Okay, we're ready to dump it on our cake, which is, by the way, still pretty warm. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just dump it right on the top. Let it run down in the sides, whatever you want to do. Just kind of spread it out with your spoon. And don't worry about any little lumps that might still be in the icing. Believe me, it's so good, no one will care whether there are little lumps in it or not. So this is more of a milk chocolate cake. Now what I do is scoot it around to the sides because I want it to run all down the sides too. I'm getting every last bit of it out. Now, I call this an icing, but it's really more like a chocolate sauce, really. Okay, I am ready to cut a piece of this for me and my husband, and we're going to enjoy this and watch a little TV tonight. And remember, it's still warm. So if the first piece doesn't come out, we're not going to worry about it. I get that too. Oh. Don't forget your secret ingredient. I didn't list it on the recipe, This is just a way to prevent any icing from becoming sugary, you know, crystallizing, okay? So don't forget about a tablespoon. All right. Here we go. There's the first piece, and we'll let you look at that. I don't know if you can tell how moist it is or not. See, it's very, very moist. Okay, my husband and I are going to enjoy this, and we will see you next time with another recipe.